Hey everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Meze Astru IEM. This is a $900 flagship IEM using a CNC-milled titanium shell, and it has a 32 ohm single dynamic driver with pretty decent sensitivity. At $900, this is clearly a flagship IEM, and I think flagship does not always guarantee a certain level of sound quality or performance. In fact, a lot of sub-$100 IEMs sound absolutely incredible, and some of them I like more than multi-$1,000 IEMs. So it doesn't always mean sound quality. However, in Meze's case, part of what you're paying for is not just the R&D, but also the build quality and materials used, and we'll cover all that in this review. Before I get any further, Meze Audio did send this to me for review. Doesn't affect what I say about it. There's no monetary exchange for making this content, and they have no idea what I'm going to say about it. Now, I will have purchase links in the description below. Some of those, the majority, will be non-affiliate links, so you don't think that I'm profiting off of anything I'm going to say. I will have a Meze official link, which will have an affiliate tracking code. I get a small kickback from that. Purchase it however you like. I'm always honest and transparent. You'll soon see in this review what I like and don't like about it, and hopefully help make your decision a little bit easier. I try my best to include a chapter called Too Long Didn't Watch. That's basically a high-level summary of what this entire video is about, and then you can decide if you want to watch further. It's $900, so just keep that in mind. If that's out of your budget, maybe you're just watching for the fun anyway. But what Meze does keep with the Astru is the comfort. In fact, the comfort is slightly improved over the Alba because the nozzle size is slightly smaller, and the shell, even though it's a more premium product, actually weighs less, being that it's using titanium instead of a mix of zinc alloy and aluminum. Sound quality wise is not going to be for everyone, but what's consistently good about the Astru is the bass quality. It's definitely warm and impactful and textured. I absolutely love the bass. The treble response is going to vary greatly from ear to ear. On mine, it happens to work really well. So this review is going to kind of dive into all the what and why and everything else, but hopefully that gives you an idea what to expect. So let's take a look at what's included in the box, and then we'll dive in closer to the IEM itself. This is obviously a very premium product, so the packaging and unboxing experience should be quite nice, and it usually is with Meze in general. That took me a moment, but so it's a multi-layer approach, kind of like a layer cake. Now, normally your IEMs would be presented here, then you have the Y split because this cable has a very unique little split where it goes for your left and right channel. And this is the presentation of the termination that it has, which is 4.4 balance. Then you get a piece of titanium that says Astru on it, and I have no idea what to use this for, but it's included. It does have the serial number on it, so maybe that's like the official way of keeping track of that. So let's remove the first layer, and that presents you with the first round of accessories. You have a case here, which is a hard case. It's squishy to an extent, but it's going to protect it from impacts. Very important for an IEM of this kind of value, because if you leave the wires plugged into it and pack it away, if it's a soft pouch, you risk damaging or breaking the pins off. So this is going to give you better protection for travel. It'll just take up a little bit more space. You do get a huge variety of liquid silicone tips. It's extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. And as you can see, I am using the large tips for my particular IEM. Because the nozzles are a little bit on the smaller side, you want to make sure you have a good seal, because that's how you get good bass delivery. So just make sure you play with it. If you find the bass lacking with any IEM, or it sounds really thin and light, you might not have the best seal or the right tip, so experiment with that. Removing the next layer presents you with this. You get a little fold out piece of paper that talks about the Astru, the warranty, the specs, hair, accessories, etc. You also get a soft pouch. So I mentioned this, a more firm pouch before. If you just want to protect it from scratches, you get this nifty little like envelope. This is pretty basic. Obviously, the Astru is a very premium product. This is enough to protect the shell, but that is about it. Don't expect much else in terms of protection. And then you get, this is what I do like, however, and that is the adapter. The reason why this is cool is because the Astru cable is terminated with 4.4. There's no removable cable termination at the end. It's fixed to it. And then the adapter that they give you to step that down turns it into a 3.5. I like this particular one because it has like a continued premium feel to it. It doesn't just feel like an afterthought. Some cable companies, or at least IEMs on the less expensive side, you get this nice termination and cable, and then you'll get like a black plastic adapter to step it down, or you unscrew it to change the termination, which is going to take up a lot less space. So factor this in if you're planning on plugging it into a single-ended output you're going to use this extension. Otherwise, just replace the cable. You may not need to replace the cable though, because frankly, I think this cable is fantastic. There's no perfect cable out there. There is a little bit of a memory effect to it. This kink is from where it was packaged in the box. So it has a memory effect there that I'll probably just heat up to kind of loosen it and get it to come back out. And even just that alone really kicked it out mostly. So it's not too bad. This cable is oxygen-free copper. It's to be expected at this kind of price range, and it's about 4 feet long. So as far as the lengths go, it's fine. I think the braid is good. It's a good balance of weight quality and ease of use. It's not like a really heavy cable or anything like that. And because of the low microphonics and relatively low memory effect, it's easy to deal with. I actually like this particular thickness. It's more preferred for me because if you go really thin and light, they tend to tangle very easily. I love the Alba IEM. I've used it a ton, but this cable always snags. I'm always untying things, and because this is a little bit more robust and thicker, it doesn't seem to want to snag as much. So from a quality of life perspective, I think this is a really nice wire. This uses a 2-pin connection, so I'm going to remove that because I want to focus on the shell a little bit. This is an incredibly light, compact IEM, and I'm a car guy, and I can't help but think this reminds me of like a nice T3, T4 turbocharger. I love the shape of this, and ergonomically, it's just worked really well for my ears. I'm pretty sensitive to IEMs, and that's part of why I don't review them too often, is because I often just like wearing over-ear headphones, unless I find an IEM that just happens to work well for my ear. So I'll make a couple comparisons to others later, but what's interesting, when you compare it to the Alba, in terms of geometry goes, the Astru has a slightly smaller nozzle than the Alba, which is pretty awesome. So it's a very compact shell, and even though it has more premium materials, what's interesting is it's slightly lighter than the Alba as well, thanks to the entire housing being titanium. Now, this is a port for the dynamic driver, so this is vented. This helps with bass response, but it also helps give you that pressure relief if you're wearing an IEM. Some IEMs are not vented. Most are starting to be vented nowadays. It's really not as much of an issue to me anymore. But it's nice to see that this is vented either way, because that also bodes well for long-term comfort. Now, with the housing being titanium, titanium can scratch very easily. So what Meze did was they used this electroplating process, and the entire manufacturing process for this IEM takes quite a long time. This is not a mass-produced design, but the idea of this is to help protect it from easily scratching, because titanium by itself just shows everything. This is not perfect. I've seen some people already post pictures online of some of the finish chipping. So I think you need to be careful with it. I haven't been like so pristine with this where I'm only wearing white gloves. It's sat on my desk for a while next to some other audio products, and so far the finish is holding up well. But if you do travel a lot, just keep in mind that you might eventually see some form of wear. Maybe it'll develop a patina over the edge of this cut right here, but it's worth pointing out. And the Alba had similar issues where, this finish can chip and kind of wear out over time. It's not going to affect the integrity of the IEM or make it sound any different, but that all metal finish is going to show things over time. What you cannot see is the 10mm dynamic driver that's inside this housing. And at a flagship price of $900 with a single DD, not too many IEMs in this price range do that, but I'm glad Meze did here because there's some unique benefits to it, partly being this incredibly compact design, which helps, with comfort. We'll get into what that does to sound quality, but this dynamic driver is not a mass-produced high-volume driver. The manufacturing process takes about 2 days just to build the driver because of the process of adhesion and all the layers that's built up. Before I get into sound quality, I just wanted to show you something because I will be making a comparison to the full Don X, which is a relatively different approach on build and tuning, a little bit more money as well. It's $1,300, but I wanted to put the Astru in one ear and the Don X in the other. A lot of flagship IEMs that have a lot of driver counts, they typically have a larger resin shell, and you can see the difference from how that fits in my ear. It definitely sticks out more. This is still a relatively comfortable IEM despite its size and weight, but it's definitely not a stealthy looking IEM whatsoever. However, with the Astru, that really tucks in there. And I'm not advocating for sleeping with IEMs, but some people will lay on a pillow, or if you travel and you like to wear a beanie or something like that, having a compact shell is huge. There's nothing wrong with having a compact shell, but you do get unique advantages that the larger shell does not allow you to do. Moving on into sound quality, I want to start with the objective side first, which uses the Brüel & Kjær 5128 in this case, because I'll be showing you a couple other measurements as well. This IEM in particular measures quite uniquely from rig to rig and ear to ear, so some people might hear it quite differently. Some other IEMs I think has less of a difference in how it reacts to your head. I don't know if it's just the open nature of this particular single DD and its insertion depth, but that will be covered more in the subjective side of listening afterwards. One thing I want to show you first though is I have a new website called IEMdatabase.com. Consider this like pre-alpha, but I'm building extra tools into this to help with future research that is completely free. I don't gatekeep any of this. So what I'm going to be doing is actually doing the impedance plots of many different IEMs out there. One of the advantages of showing you the electrical impedance with certain products is one is it demonstrates how it might behave differently from high output impedance amplifiers and for multi-driver configurations such as a tribrid that has, let's say, a dynamic, some BAs, and an EST driver. If you have all of these different multi-driver setups, the crossover points typically show up with impedance changes on the measurements, and you can kind of see what driver is doing what. Now, because this is a single DD, it's fair to say it's going to be relatively flat and smooth. It depends how it's tuned though. And the Alba and the Astru have very similar impedances of 32 ohms. However, you can see a bump on the Astru that happens closer to 4,000 hertz. This is actually quite important because you can see on the Alba, the bump is closer to 3,000 hertz. And if we transition into the frequency response, you can actually see that the impact of the impedance change in the higher frequencies also affects the frequency response. So when we look at the inspector, the Alba has a bump closer to 3,000 hertz, and then the Astru, even though it's not as pronounced, it does shift everything slightly higher in the frequency range to 4,000 hertz. Now, if we look at the compensation target for the diffuse field for this particular rig, the HRTF of the 5128, this is how both IEMs compare to each other. So the Astru is the light blue line. You can see a bigger dip here, closer to 3,000 hertz. And again, I talked about that bump on the Alba, kind of lifting it in that area. And then here is the Astru kind of picking back up. And the reason why I'm kind of focusing on the treble is because these dips and rises is what's going to drastically change from ear to ear. It works really well for my hearing, and I'll get into that subjective side in a second, but you can see that the Astru has more bass than the Alba. It's a little bit warmer and deeper and frankly more impactful. So this is a little bit more of a W-shaped tuning because it has a lift closer to like 1 to 2K, and then it kind of falls off a little bit before picking back up in the treble, but the treble variance can make it sound quite different from ear to ear. So this is not indicative of exactly how you're going to hear it. It's just more or less how the 5128 hears it. If we quickly compare the objective measurements of the Astru to the full Don X, which is a full of high treble, there is a noticeable difference in high treble, and I hear that quite significantly on my ear. The general tuning is kind of similar from the bass and mid-range up until about 1500 hertz, and then it starts to vary, of course. So it's still a W-shaped tuning idea, which I kind of liked because it was a little bit of a different flavor, but the high treble is significantly more pronounced. So if you're a treble head and you like some of the characteristics I'll be describing with the Astru, but you just want a lot more air, the Don X is maybe something I would keep on your radar, but that's going to take us to the subjective side. And I have a lot of good things to say about the subjective side of things because, one, get a good seal, make sure this fits right. If you find the Astru does not have a lot of bass, you probably don't have the right tip. And if the tips that come with it don't work for you, try something like the Danu S&S tips, which is more of a square fit. And because these have a smaller nozzle, you can roll tips pretty easily. Get a good seal, make sure you have good bass first and foremost. Once that's been done, you're ready to rock and roll. And when I put these in my ear, I was generally blown away by the bass performance. That was my favorite thing about it. I listen to a huge variety of music, and I'll go from like Tool and Chevelle to EDM and listen to Rez or even some of the older like Tiesto, Armin van Buuren stuff, and everything in between. I listen to a lot of different music, and like Hans Zimmer, for example, James Blake, I could go on. But the bass performance of this lends itself so well to what I listen to, and because rock I think benefits from a little bit extra warmth and not emphasized as much, even though like it helps with kind of the attack of the dynamics of things by having the lift at 1 to 2K, 1 to 2000 kilohertz. With IEMs, if that area is lifted too much, it immediately comes across too shouty to me, and it's almost like too forward and abrasive, and that's why I have a huge problem with a lot of IEMs. They sound good at moderate volumes and especially with EDM, but as soon as you turn it up, the sound signature shifts away from what I like to listen to as a preference target, for example. And with the Astru being shifted slightly higher, it works so much better for me. And then you pair that with the warm bass that it has with just ridiculous sense of impact. Rock music sounds great. It's one of my favorite IEMs I've listened to for rock music, and that says a lot because usually I don't really touch IEMs for rock. And then because I find IEMs particularly shouty in the 1 to 2K area, because this shifts everything slightly higher, it just made vocals sound really good for me as well. The tonality is pretty nice on these. I don't think it sounds as like razor sharp as some other IEMs, such as the Dawn X, which just, it kind of cheats to an extent because it's not just a little bit more resolving. I think a lot of that has to do with just the treble tuning. It's a lot more in your face. And if you want to hear everything in the recording and, you know, the pluckiness of the guitar, there's a little bit of an unnaturalness to it with the Dawn X because it's so sharp and aggressive. It kind of adds to trailing tones because of that. This has a little bit more of a natural decay to me, and musical instruments just sound more typical of what I expect. So from a generalist perspective, the Astru has just been fantastic. One of the byproducts of the treble tuning being the way it is on the Astru is because you have a couple peaks and dips, and that can vary from listener to listener. Sometimes it will truncate a lot of notes that you typically would expect to hear a little bit fuller and longer. And what happens is it can come across as less resolving or revealing. It's a very smooth listen for me. I didn't have the grating treble effect that I think a couple people out there have. It just works well for my ears, but it doesn't have that like razor's edge technical performance. If you're just chasing the utmost detail on an IEM, this is great. Partly it is a result of the tuning, but something like the Dawn X, you tend to hear more subtle details. And a huge part of that is how much more in your face it is with treble. I have to EQ the Dawn X to tame the treble to a more listenable level for me as far as amplitude and how aggressive it is. However, there's no denying that if you are chasing that ultimate like digital effect of hearing every single byte of your music, the Dawn X is better for that. The Astru is more of an analog presentation, which is probably a really cliche, weird thing to say. But I say it in a sense that it smooths over enough things for me where I don't feel like it's overly aggressive in my face. And if you know how to sine sweep to find where those peaks and dips are in the treble, highly recommend doing that, because if you can do parametric EQ, you can kind of fix a couple of the possible deficiencies in the treble tuning to make it more agreeable for you. What you can't EQ is comfort and shell design to have a better fit and feel on your head. So if you like the way a compact IEM feels, I would go with something like this. Now, there are some other really compact IEMs out there. Sennheiser has the IE like 600, 900s. I don't have one of those at the house. I've listened to them at shows, and I really just can't recall fully enough to completely isolate the differences between them. So I'm sorry I can't make that direct comparison. Those are just the ones that come to mind from a compactness perspective, aside from the Alba itself. The Alba, which I didn't touch on, it sounds almost like a safer tune to me. The Alba is a really nice IEM, and I think the mid-range and treble tuning is actually quite nice, and it has a little bit sharper treble in the high treble to me. So again, it kind of starts getting back into the issue I had with the Dawn X, but much less extreme. I've been daily driving the Alba when I travel for a reason. It's just, it fits in a really small case, and it's a very discreet IEM to wear, so I just love using them. And the Alba has since replaced that, because the biggest thing I kept picking up on when I transitioned from the Alba to the Astru's bass performance is just unworldly good. And I like bass. I don't like so much bass that it's ruining everything else, but I like to hear good bass, and the Astru just absolutely kills it in that regard. And that about wraps up the review. I think this is a really good IEM to try. If you're going to a show or you can get your hands on one of these, definitely give it a listen, because it's unique enough. I think a lot of people will like it. But because of that risk in the treble tuning, just give yourself an option in case the IEM doesn't work for you. Find a place that has a usable return policy. There are resellers in my description below, or retailers that have a good return policy. Even Amazon has an okay return policy. So headphones.com is 365 days if you don't abuse it, which is pretty freaking wild. So this is a wonderful IEM. It's a flagship. Any flagship's not going to be for everyone. They all have unique things. It's just about finding what works well for you. So by watching this video, I hope I answered some questions you may have. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, because I have some big content coming soon, including that gaming headset roundup that everyone keeps asking about. I am working on that flagship one. So thank you so much for watching and making it to the end, and I'll see you next time. Bye.